Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much for being on the Speak as a Leader podcast. I was actually honestly thrilled that you said yes. And woke up with this big smile on my face because I knew that I was going to have this great conversation with you because I feel like I know you, even though this is the first time that we're actually talking face to face. And this is magical. And this is exactly what I want to dive into. So thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for talking to me.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. I've been watching you and listening to you speak as well. And it is so fun to meet people when you've interacted with them in, one way and then to finally get an opportunity to meet with them face to face. It's the best, especially when then you can take it to the next level where you actually meet in person. Then that's even more magical.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to dive into it and talk about your personal journey, your personal and professional journey. I think that, like me, your personal and professional lives are very closely intertwined. So I would love to know a little bit about how you got here with your own company, with now your own group of companies, and how the journey has been so far.
That's a good question. So, to answer that, so I started my journey with speaking, not wanting to speak. I'll say that much. So around the time when the pandemic happened, at that point in time, I had done some speaking where I worked in with dealing with the team, and where I was working, there was probably close to 500 employees. And so if there were big groups of us together at a time, I would be talking to, let's say, like 70 or 80 people. And every time I would be so nervous whenever I would have any conversation with anyone. And it really freaked me out to be in front of people and to be up on a stage. And it's very funny to me now because I look at LinkedIn as an example as a stage. I look at it more of like Madison Square Garden level and not just, in the meeting room where I was working. But during the pandemic, that's really when I was freaked out about everything that was happening in the world. But mostly I was thinking about like, what am I going to do if something happens to my job? And we had gone through these layoffs, like many companies and many industries were doing. And I was just really concerned that it was going to be me next. And I had like no backup plan at all. And I had two kids. Well, I have two kids. At the time, they were in preschool and kindergarten. And I was just thinking to myself, how am I going to do this? And what happens if I lose my job? Because there was just so much uncertainty. And so one of the things that I challenged myself with was being on video, number one. And the second thing was doing speaking engagements because I knew that those were two things that I absolutely hated doing and I was not comfortable doing. And so I literally started doing by like almost cursing myself. Why am I doing this? Why am I even doing these things? But it really helped me in many ways because now I can look back at this journey that I've been on and say, oh my God, like this is where I was and this is where I am now. And kind of all those emotions that have happened in between. But it was definitely something that I did as a challenge because it was something that made me really uncomfortable. And now today, I think when I'm speaking in front of anyone, I think it's definitely natural to have like some reservations or to get a little bit nervous and to have some apprehension before you're speaking, especially if you're speaking in front of a large group of people. But I also know that if you are confident in the topic that you're speaking on, which most of the time, if I'm going to speak on something, I know that I need to know like somewhat of what I'm talking about to like exude the confidence that I have in the topic. But I really feel that if you're confident in your knowledge and and you know what you're talking about and you feel that you are the subject matter expert in whatever you're talking about, it's just a matter of blocking out everything else that you think about to have that come to play. And so I started doing I started doing YouTube interviews. I had like a YouTube podcast during the pandemic. Then I started going on different panels and doing virtual speaking engagements. And then once all the restrictions lifted, I was doing speaking engagements in person. And then once I started my business in 2021, I started doing trainings with companies, specifically on LinkedIn, and on different marketing and social media trainings. And now today, I mean, and the podcast and everything like we're doing right now. And that's really how I got started with everything, but it's content. And so when you're building a content strategy for yourself or for someone else, going on podcast and speaking about what you're knowledgeable in is a great way to establish trust, to build credibility, and so on and so forth. So I knew it was just something that I had to do, even though I didn't want to.
That's such a fascinating journey. So you started
Yeah.
building your personal brand first before knowing what you were actually going to do with it, before knowing how you were going to monetize it. And then
Correct.
monetization came in its due time. So tell me about that. When did it pivot? When did the light bulb click, and when did the pieces start falling together and you realize that this is something that you want to build your entire company on?
Right. So that's a great question. So when I started, I was really focused on how do I make a name for myself and how do people find me quickly? Because I had no social digital footprint. I wasn't, if you Googled me, you wouldn't find anything. And how do I do this? Like, how do I go to market as quickly as possible? And how am I going to do it the most efficient way? And so for the first year and a half, I was selling myself and talking about the things that I was knowledgeable in. What I didn't realize in the process is that there were people who were watching me who might not necessarily have been engaging with me, but there were people who were watching me and watching the journey who now are coming to me and saying, "Hey, I've been following you for the last 3 years. I love what you've been able to do with your brand. Can you do that for me?" And that was really the whole premise of how my company was built, was because I was at a VP of marketing position at a tech company and I was not happy with what I was doing. And I felt like I just had this bigger calling for myself and something else that I could do to really make an impact, not just, within my own life, but on other people's lives as well. And I really felt like LinkedIn was this channel for me, not the case for everyone, but LinkedIn was the place where I wanted to use the megaphone, and I had established that. And so it was a really easy, seamless transition for me to go from, selling myself and talking about the knowledge that I had in marketing to then now talking to the executives and talking to my target audience about the things that they could be doing or that they should be doing in my experiences, because the audience was already there. It was built in. So when I had started, my idea was not to monetize it at all. It was really just building the name for myself that I had already built offline and just transferring that to LinkedIn and to other social platforms. That was my thought process.
Very cool. So it was very organic, this transition where you
Yeah.
started getting these queries from potential clients and you realized that, oh, wow, this is something I can actually build an entire business on. And,
Correct.
and now how did you take that forward? Because this was back in 2021, right? When you started your company, and now you're actually kind of tell me about what's happening right now, because it sounds really exciting that you've created a group of companies and now you're really expanding and scaling.
So when I started my company, I wasn't sure what long term was going to happen. I knew that I had this LinkedIn audience that I could tap into from a professional standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I really just thought I was going to be working as a consultant, as a marketing consultant. And so I thought I was going to be working, as a fractional CMO or fractional marketing department, because I had worked in marketing departments and I thought this is a really easy transition for me. But then what started happening after I established my LLC was I just started getting these messages from people saying, "Can you do for us what you did for yourself? Could you also do this for companies?" And
Mm-hmm.
it just created this agency that I wasn't planning to build. And it's funny because I talk to a lot of people, and during this process, they're like, "You're building an agency." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I am not building an agency." And if anyone has worked in an agency, it's really intense, and it wasn't something that I had planned to do or that I thought that my journey was going to have. I did not think that it was going to be an agency. But the Borden Group, the company now, is an agency. And so we focus on marketing consulting for both LinkedIn and Twitter. And we work specifically with executives and also companies. And we also work with marketing teams on their go-to-market strategy and so forth. And so one of the areas that I have talked a lot about within my own social and within some of the writing that I've done is that it's no longer just me. It's not. So I have incredible people who work for me. We have incredible freelancers that work with us, people who are experts in their field and they're the best at what they do. And if they have their own business, that's great. It's more visibility for everyone. And so it's just one of those areas that I don't ever see agencies really talking about how they have this collective of rock stars, not just their employees, because I do have a team of my own employees, but having others that we work with that are, specialists. Not everybody wants to go work for someone and have that be their only source of income. And I totally get that because I don't think that I could ever go work for anybody ever again. But for myself personally, if we can have someone who's working with us, and especially if there's great alignment with the client, I mean, there's nothing better than that. So the Borden Group, formerly known as Melanie Borden LLC, is the company. And then at one point, I did start a podcast, which has kind of been put to the side for now, and that's under Borden Media. So those are the companies that I have today. And, we're really excited about the rebrand. We're in the process of redoing our website, and we are going through a whole rebrand, obviously with the name change and the logo. So it's been a really exciting time. And actually today, in the month of March, we're bringing on 3 new employees. So it's very exciting for someone who thought she was going to be working solo just with freelancers to now have a full team of people working for me. It's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. How big is the team now?
So there will be, we have about, this sounds crazy, but we have about 8 different freelancers that we work with regularly. And then we have 5 employees.
Very cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So we're small, we're boutique, but we're nimble and we're growing, and I couldn't be happier. And the clients that we have are getting so much support that it's very exciting to just be a part of it and to watch it grow. And it's crazy, but it's fun and it's great. And it's all been generated from, me taking that little leap of faith with, okay, I'm going to record some videos and I'm going to work on my speaking.
That's incredible.
Just let it ride. Thank you.
And the fact that you've built it out in such a short period of time is also mind-blowing, because a lot of people go freelance or they stay a consultant for a very long time and they don't scale up. And then eventually a number of them would get burnt out, or they might always stay small because that's all they can manage. And then they take on X number of clients every month or every quarter, and that's it. And they're at their capacity. And the fact that you rose to the challenge and you said, no, the market has this demand. And if I can't just do it all myself, I shouldn't. And I should be building this agency that I never thought that I would be building. So it's incredible, the amount of growth that you've had.
It is crazy. And I definitely take pause, sometimes to think about how far we've come in just a short period of time. But it didn't just happen. There's been so many nights last year that I worked until 1, 2 in the morning, where it was just me and one other, or then me and 2 others, where I know that if someone isn't going to do it, it won't get done. So I do it myself. And so I think part of it has been just like the work ethic and the drive. And I also move and I operate at a very fast pace, which has also, helped us with the speed to market as well, because we're just operating at another level. It's funny. I had a call with someone today and they were like, we're trying to get to your speed. I'm like, I get it. But it's definitely, that's a part of it, definitely. But it's all those things. But whenever you see anyone that has built anything, I have so much respect for anyone who's built a podcast or who's built a business or who's built a team, because there's so much that goes into that that you don't see and that you don't hear about.
Absolutely. People see the results, they see the glamorous side of it, they see
Right.
the beautiful photos that we share or the videos where we're
Right.
laughing and smiling, and they don't see the sleepless nights, the tears, the meltdowns and almost meltdowns and breakdowns and all the
Right.
arguments you have with your own self, thinking, am I even up for this? Is this even something
Right.
I can actually do?
Right. And the crazy part also, I started getting like, it was funny. Like I was trending like every 3 months I was getting sick. And it was because of the fact that I was just pushing myself to the limit. Every 3 months, like clockwork, I would get sick. And then I ended up getting really sick at one point last year. And that's when I realized I need to hire people who can help, because I can't do it all myself. And I can still operate at my speed that I work at, but I can just have other people supporting me as well and say yes and accept the help instead of fighting it, which I did for a while. So it's definitely a journey, that is for sure.
This is such an important point because I feel that a lot of us have the superwoman syndrome. Yes, I certainly did when I was growing up. My mom was very ambitious for me. She would tell me, Nausheen, you can do anything you want. You can accomplish any task that you set your mind to. All you have to do is set your mind to it and then work very, very hard. And I internalized that. And I am in the habit of working very, very hard. That's just the life that I
Hmm.
live. And I saw that in you when we were talking even
Hmm.
earlier about the late nights, about how much
Yeah.
work we do. And what is the point where you'd have to tell yourself that I am a superwoman, but I don't always need to be. I don't always need to stretch myself to 120% because I can.
Right. That's so true. It is true. And I think that just in general, a lot of times women have a harder time saying, I need help. Or,
Mm.
and, it's not just women, it's everyone. A lot of times, especially if you're like in a family situation and you're the breadwinner or you're the one supporting someone else or you're a caregiver or whatever the situation is, a lot of times you just keep pushing through it. But like you're saying, at what point is it just, what is it worth? What is it for? If you can't actually enjoy your life and you're getting sick. And that was really the point that I got to this past November, where I said, okay, something has to change because this isn't sustainable long term. I know, and I knew at the time that this is part of it, especially if you want to, it's hard. Anything is hard in the beginning, whatever it is, whether it's you're building a social media audience or you're trying out, something new for a new field or you're starting a business, you have to put work in. It doesn't just happen. You have to. And a lot of people don't talk about that, but it's the truth. But there is a point where if it gets unhealthy, like it did with me, where I recognized what was going on and said, okay, I need to make a change. There has to be an adjustment, and I have to create a strategy for myself where this lifestyle that I have can still be supported, but by bringing in more people. And what I'll tell you this is that when anything happens in life where you take something away or you remove something, something else fills its place. And my biggest concern was if I slow down, it's going to affect my work product. It's going to affect my clients. I'm going to lose clients over it. And what has happened in return by bringing in more people is that the universe has recognized that my team is growing. And so not only did it not have the impact that I thought it would, it's having the opposite impact where I'm getting, more sleep and eating healthy and exercising and making time for myself. Whereas before I wasn't, because I
Mm.
was just focused on business kids and that was it. But Melanie didn't come into play at all for a good
Yeah.
year or so. So it's definitely a lesson that I share all the time because it's something that I don't think a lot of people talk about as much as they should.
Yeah. It's very true. I've seen two extremes. I've seen people talk about hustle culture and then people kind of rebel against it, saying like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we should have a 4-day work week. Everyone should get done with work by 3 p.m. and go take your kid out for skiing. And I can't relate to that second part because, like you
I
said,
know.
you need to be in heads down building phase when you're starting out. There are no two ways about it. You can't have a good work-life balance. It's just way too idealistic and it's not going to happen. You're just going to give yourself grief over working that hard instead of accepting that
Yeah.
it's going to happen. So I like that idea of that tipping point, really, where you understand that I've built something to a point where now I can bring on people to help me so that the business doesn't slow down. It's just
I
me giving myself a break.
Right. And I think also, I think a lot of times the people, those two different categories of people that you're talking about, the hustle culture and then the people who are against it. I think the people who are against it, in my opinion, and this is, this isn't the case with everyone, but I think sometimes, they don't know what happens with a business and, the brands that they love today, what happened in those early stages. And, that owner of that business at the time that's now public, how they were sacrificing time, with their family or at a basketball game or whatever, doing a call and, in order to provide a specific, goal in life for themselves and for their family and all of that. So you don't always see all of that.
Mm.
And, growing up, my dad had his own business and he would work 7 days a week. And I never understood it until I had my own business, which again, like being a consultant, I thought, okay, I'm going to work less. It's going to be something different. I won't have to, be on calls all day long. I thought it was going to be a totally different experience than what I'm living. But that's a path that I chose. I chose that path. I could have gone the other way, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But I
Yeah.
think that everyone is so different with those two different mindsets. Like it's either hustle or not hustle. I just think that everyone has to understand that everyone is so different. Everyone's goals are different. It's just like a strategy on LinkedIn, right? Everyone has a
Yeah.
different style and everyone's going to have a different outcome that they perceive as being what's beneficial for them. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. But yeah, I get it. I mean, I encourage like the people who work for me. I'm like, I don't want you in front of your computer all day long if you're feeling burnt out and stressed because it's going to impact our work product that we're giving to our clients. And I'd
Mm.
rather you work in bursts of time because that's a more efficient way to do it. If that works for you, if you want to be in front of your computer all day, go for it. But if not, like go outside, take a walk and do all those things and have those strategies that work best for you.
Mm. That sounds really balanced and healthy. I want to switch gears a bit and talk about the Melanie Borden brand. One of the
Okay.
things that I found really endearing and memorable was right off the bat, the first conversation that we had was just so memorable. You started talking to me as if you had come up to me at a party or at a networking event and we were just striking up a conversation over drinks. I don't know if you remember,
Right.
but the first conversation
Yeah.
we had was about hair and how we
Yeah.
have a relationship with our hair, and we started just talking, and it was so silly but it was so endearing. And I talk to a lot of people, as I'm sure you do as well, but I remember our first conversation. I don't remember the first conversation I had with a lot of other people. And that's why it really stood out that wow, Melanie is just so memorable and impactful just
Thank
based on
you.
it was just sincere conversation. So I want to know, did you have intentionality in building this brand, in speaking the way that you do, both at events and podcasts, and also your tone of voice when you speak online?
Yes, I do. I'm very cognizant. And I think in the beginning, I was more hyper aware of everything that I was speaking on and how I was sounding and how I looked and all of that, because I wasn't just representing myself, I was also representing the company that I was working for.
Mhm.
So I was definitely more aware, and I was very, very careful about the things that I was saying and what I was doing and how I was doing. And was that the best way to go about it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, because if I didn't go to market for myself that way, I wouldn't be where I am right now. But I do think a lot about the things that I'm saying and what I'm doing and how I interact. But the thing is that I know that LinkedIn specifically, it is like a cocktail party. It is a way where you can build relationships and form relationships with people on the other side of the world. I mean, you and I are literally in two different worlds, right? We're not in the sense of we're oceans apart from each other, but we managed to have that one connection. And it's something where I am very honest. I'm direct. As I say to anyone who knows me, you always know where you stand with me. And I think that people are not used to that when they interact with someone for the first time, but that's really who I am. And that's how I am. And I also think that people become intimidated because they see this large number that's associated with my account. Whereas, to me, the number is just a number. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than the fact that people are interested in the things that I have to say, but I'm not looking at it like I have a superiority complex. And I think that that's an assumption that people make, specifically with social media, that if you have some sort of a large following, that you're, not necessarily a nice person. But and I've seen it on the other side too. I've seen people who I've tried to interact with. There are many people who I've tried to engage with on the platform who have not been very receiving to me, or they're just, I'm not for them.
Mhm.
So I think that it depends on the person. I think it depends on the context of how you're engaging with them. But yes, everything that I do for the most part has intention behind it. And anyone who I want to interact with, there's a reason. That reason could vary from, just becoming friendly with them. And, they might have, something positive going on that I want to be a part of. For example, someone could have a podcast like yourself, and connecting with someone like you gives me an opportunity to also tap into your audience and vice versa, right? Because you
Mhm.
having me on your podcast, you're then going to be exposed to my audience and to the people who follow me. And then there might be another connection from there. And some of the
Mhm.
people, and I found you through someone else who had commented on one of your posts. And it's funny because some of the people who I work very closely with now, that's how I've connected with them. Someone I know interacted with them, and I interacted with them after that. And for you, instantly, because I've been on this hair journey very publicly. If anyone has followed me over time, they've seen me have like super long hair, super short hair. I haven't changed colors yet, but who
Mhm.
knows? That could happen. But I definitely think, for me, I like building relationships. I've always been a relationship person. And I think that a lot of people get lost in the algorithm and the technical aspect of the platform, and focusing so hard on the number, when a lot of the conversion comes from just being a real person and having conversations, and forgetting about the fact that it's this digital platform, when you could be on one side of the world and I can be on the other side of the world and we can be friends. And you
Mhm.
just never know what that could lead to.
I love that you mentioned building relationships because that is exactly what I believe in as well. For life, for sure, but definitely for business. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of my whole journey in China because when I first came here, I hardly knew anyone. I knew my husband is half Chinese, so he had some Chinese family here. And those were the only people we knew. And I had to build my business from scratch. I was very much like you, where I was a freelance filmmaker for a while. And all I did was I invested in building relationships with startups, with other entrepreneurs, with other people in the filmmaking community, with eventually people in the corporate world here. And within 2 years, a lot of people started getting to know who I was. I started getting interviewed by local newspapers and magazines. I was on, local Chinese TV multiple times, and people started coming to me, and everyone was like, how did you do this? How did people start getting to know you? People started
Right.
referring other people to me. And it was just because I started getting to know people with no
Right.
agenda. It was just that I'm new. I just want to get to know you, get to know about how things work here. Would you like to grab coffee? And then keeping that relationship going beyond that initial meeting.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. And that's what's so great about, this world today is that there's so many different avenues to do that in outside of being in person.
Mm-hmm.
And for so many of us, during that time, like during 2020, it was like, how do you adapt and how do you adjust and how do you make these changes to adhere to what we were experiencing in the world? Because it was crazy and it was a crazy time. So
Mm-hmm.
relationships are everything. And that's really why a lot of times when I think about, your brand and building your brand and building a business, it's a long game because the more that you do things like, going to parties or networking events, and you don't necessarily have to do all that stuff today. In the past, maybe you had to go to like a networking event or you had to do things, but there are so many other alternate routes that someone can use to build relationships. And
Yeah.
that's what having a business is all about. You have clients, you're building the relationships with your clients. And then you have this great relationship and then they introduce you to somebody else who,
Mm-hmm.
needs help with whatever, the solution is that you have. So yeah, relationships
Mm-hmm.
are everything. And, leveraging different tools online is a great way to do it. Like your podcast is another great way to build
Mm-hmm.
relationships with your audience.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Because podcasts build what we hope is a deeper relationship because people are spending so much more time with you, with your voice, with your thoughts,
Right.
and with the people that you bring on, which,
Yeah.
I've gotten some really great feedback from the community. So what has been, if you look back over the last 2 years, what has been the biggest opportunity that you've gotten because you've built your personal brand? Maybe it could be an event that you were on or a client that you got, and it made you go, wow, I can't believe that I'm getting this opportunity. I can't believe this door is open for me.
That's such a hard question to ask because I feel that there's been so many of those moments that I've had over the last 2 years where I'm like, how did this even happen? Like, how did this happen? But it happened because, of X, Y, and Z. But there was an opportunity that I had over the summer, and this is actually an interesting story. So there was a woman that I met on LinkedIn in 2020, and we literally met in the comments. It was one of those situations where like I started following her, or she started following me, and then we started commenting on each other. And we just built this friendship through LinkedIn and through the comments, as I'm sure you do and a lot of your listeners do. And she came to me this past summer, and she's a part of this large networking group where it's all these C-suite executives, it's all senior level women. And she said, how do you feel about doing a speaking engagement for these women about how to build their personal brand? And the group is called Chief, which is starting to move, overseas, and it's in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a wait list. Literally, there's 40,000 women on this wait list, including myself. I've been on the wait list for a couple of years. And she said, would you be interested in doing that? And I said, of course, it's amazing. I would love to. So she said, okay, we have 500 seats that are open. But we usually get a few hundred, so we'll see. And she reached out to me, I guess it was probably like a couple weeks before the event. And she said, okay, so there's more women that want to RSVP to the event. So we're opening it up to 750 women.
Oh,
And
oh.
I was like, holy moly, this is amazing. And I was so excited and it ended up being great. And then she's now one of my clients.
Hmm.
And also she invited me back again, in January to do another one. So that was one of those moments where there was like with her, like there was no intention behind us connecting in 2020. It was just, we're both stuck at home during the pandemic and we're both hanging out on LinkedIn and we're trying to find our way through this crazy world that we're living in. And oh, hey, we have this in common. And so just building that relationship. But that's definitely been one of the moments. And then her becoming a client was, really incredible. And
Mm.
so ever since, that happened, it was beshert. It was meant to be. It was just a very, exciting time. But that was definitely one of the opportunities that I've had that have like professionally that have come across my desk where I said, wow, it's exciting for the person who was
Mm.
afraid to speak on camera, so yeah.
That's an incredible story. I love
Yes.
that it just happened. It happened organically, but because you had taken time to build your brand and to build it with this intentionality, and you'd done all that
Right.
work so that when you reached out to her, when she reached out to you, the building of that relationship came naturally to you because you knew that this is something you wanted to invest in.
Right. And what's interesting about it is, I love doing those kind of events and talking with, others who are in, similar type of roles or have had similar roles. Or a lot of times there's a lot of people who work in marketing, that I'll talk to. And what's funny about that is that marketers are so great at promoting others, but they're the worst at promoting themselves,
Yeah.
which you'll find a lot of the times. And so I think about myself in 2020, and I would have loved to attend some sort of a workshop or something where someone could tell me, like, these are the different steps and these are the things that I need to do to promote myself. Or if I'm not comfortable with posting, what are some alternate routes or some other things that I could do? And so that's really just me wanting to help others in that sense,
Mm.
where I would have loved to have something like that. And so I love doing those kinds of events if someone is interested in having me do them.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's putting it out there, it's setting the intention. And I think also asking for it too. I think that a lot of times we don't always ask for those opportunities. Sometimes those opportunities come, but one of the things that I had learned on LinkedIn was I was never asking for anything because I was really just talking about my knowledge, my expertise, who I was, sharing personal content, sharing educational content. But I think that it's okay to put out there what you do, how you do it, and to ask for the business because at the end of the day, LinkedIn is a site where people are networking and it's for business. So it's expected that there's some level of self promotion. And I
Mm.
think that it's okay to do that. I don't think it should be everything you do, but I do
Yeah.
think that asking for those opportunities and opening yourself up to them is step one in the right direction also.
Absolutely. That's just a natural part of doing business on any platform to strike that balance between
Right.
personability and selling and making sure that you're telling people, I'm not just doing one of those things, I'm going to do both.
Right. Right. Exactly. And you see that too. It doesn't matter the platform that you're on. It could be a business platform like LinkedIn, which is becoming more of not necessarily just business. It's an
Yeah.
everything platform.
Yeah.
So, you look at TikTok or you look at Instagram or you look at Facebook, you have people that are essentially doing the same thing that we're doing on LinkedIn. It's just a different audience. It's just where their audience is and the platform that they feel the most comfortable with.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about your specific speaking style and how you worked on it, because I know that if I look at my videos from even 3 years ago, I can see a huge difference because I was using filler words. I was not entirely sure of how to make very specific eye contact with the camera. I felt like I was confident, but when I watch myself back, there are times where I'm just struggling to find the right words. And I noticed throughout this podcast, you've had almost zero filler words and you've had great energy. Those are at least two things that I've noticed right off the bat. So I would love to know how you actually worked on your speaking style to improve it.
That's another good question. So I really just speak. I speak in a way how I try to look at whoever I'm speaking to like I'm talking to a friend. And I try to block out anything that would make me uncomfortable. And that's really how I got more comfortable with speaking. It was creating these blocks for me where I didn't feel that I was on camera, or I didn't feel like someone was going to be watching this later, or but I'll also tell you, so my partner is a trial attorney. And during this process, we've been together like way through the pandemic and everything. And, when you're a trial attorney, you are, talking through so much and you're standing up and it's an entire performance. I mean, I don't think he would like me saying that, but that's how I view it. When you talk about, the stage and theater, he is in his own stage. And so I really watched a lot of what he's done and seeing him, and he's very natural when he speaks, and trying to emulate some of those qualities that he has. And really what it comes down to is confidence in just knowing that I know what I'm talking about, and feeling that the people who I'm talking to will see that, and kind of ignoring any of that, blocking different things out, like what they're thinking of me, how my, hair looks, how, my makeup looks, or what I'm wearing, or all those things that we might think about when we're in front of other people and we're speaking, and just really focusing on the topics that we're talking about. And that's really, and just the frequency of doing it. And the more you do it, it's like riding a bike. The more you ride a bike, the better you get. For me, it's snowboarding. I used to snowboard a lot when I was younger, and then I kind of stopped, and I'm sort of getting back into it. And, it's trying and just doing. And so that's for me with the speaking, is just knowing what I'm talking about and really blocking out anything else and just focusing on the topic. But that's also my style in general, where I'm very good at compartmentalizing. And a big part of that for me with speaking is doing that, being able to compartmentalize the things around me that would take me off focus.
I love that you brought up the performance aspect of it, because not a lot of people do. And it's absolutely a performance, but we've associated the word performance with such negative connotations that we think that, oh, if someone's performing, they're putting on a show and they're not being authentic, where it's actually the opposite, because you're amplifying parts of yourself to become more relatable, to become more approachable.
Right, absolutely. So there was this expression that I learned years ago, and it's an advertising term, it's a radio term, and it's called theater of the mind. And so theater of the mind dates back to the 1930s, the 1940s for radio, right before there was color television, before there was television, where people would put on a program on the radio and they would listen, similarly like they do today with the podcast, and they had to imagine what was happening as they were essentially playing out a scene. And it could be, a Western radio show, or it could be, a drama or murder mystery, whatever it was. But they called it this theater of the mind because you had to imagine what was happening. And I think when it comes to speaking, and it comes to pretty much anything, it definitely is some sort of a performance for sure, especially if you're getting up in front of a group of people or you're speaking in front of people. And I'm not perfect at it. And there's definitely times where, I get nervous, or I mess up, or I get off track, because everybody has room to grow. But it's one of those things where you have to emulate those things that you want to become in order to exude that confidence and to have that level of knowing. Are you tapping into that? Are you, preaching? Are you acting all the things that you're preaching? Are you doing all these things on a regular basis? And the way that when I was learning about theater of the mind, it was more around customer experience. And because at the time I was working in retail. And so we would talk about theater of the mind with, how do the customers feel when they're walking in? What is their overall experience? Because perception is reality. And what are they experiencing when they're walking in the front door? And how are people greeting them? And what are they doing? And what is going on around you? And so I like to look at theater of the mind for a couple different ways, including the speaking, because I do think that you can tap into it to tap into your audience as well.
Your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right?
Right.
And I love that idea of contributing to this narrative that people are building of you in their mind. Of course, if you're intentionally building your personal brand, you're intentionally contributing to that narrative. You're taking charge and taking control. And that's very powerful.
Absolutely, for sure. Definitely. And if you look at people who are on stage and, these incredible speakers that you see, I think at some point they've also been in that same spot where they might have just started out, or maybe they just start like everyone started somewhere and they had to tap into something to get to where they are. So there's definitely a part of that I am still living through where in my head, I might be saying, I don't know. There's so many people in this room where if I can compartmentalize and I can box it out and I am exuding exactly who it is that I am and doing it in front of all these people, that to me, that's the best way that I can do it. And I'm sure everyone has their own strategies around that. But for me, it's really just knowing exactly what I'm talking about. And I think the most confident people who are on stage or who are speaking on a podcast, they're subject matter experts in what they're talking about. And that's why they're there.
Mm. Absolutely. Something that you also mentioned a few minutes ago that struck a chord was not being super self-conscious about how you look or what your hair is looking like or what you're wearing. But at the same time, I know, and you've probably experienced this kind of pushback from a lot of clients, people are hesitant to put themselves out there because they feel super self-conscious and they feel
right.
They feel scared. They feel very apprehensive of what are people going to say? Are they going to make fun of the way I look? Are they going to make fun of the way I talk? Are they going to ridicule me? And I know based on how I've been following you that you've also had your fair share of trolls or your unfair share of trolls. So how was that? Do you remember the first time you got trolled? And do you have a strategy now for dealing with that?
So the first time that I got trolled, I don't remember the first time that I got trolled, but I will tell you a memorable moment when I got trolled, because this was a turning point for me with building my personal brand. When in December of 2020, when I was recording all these videos, right? It's funny because if you go into the LinkedIn feed now, LinkedIn just made this update where they restructured how aesthetically your posts are presented, and you can select and you can choose what you want first. You want your post first, you want your video first, you want article first, etc. So when this feature rolled out the other night, I went into a hole for probably an hour looking at video from 2020, and like part of me was embarrassed, but then the other part of me was really proud because I thought, wow, like I came so far from where I started. But at that time in December of 2020, I was doing a video and someone commented to me about how I looked really tired in the video. And it was a video that had to do with, and again, I was wearing makeup, I had my hair done. I mean, I was dressed nicely. I don't remember what I was wearing, but someone made a comment about my appearance. And so I took that person's comment. At the time, my strategy was just to delete and block, or block and delete. And I did a post about how everyone all over the world was tired, and the post went viral. I would say it wasn't viral to today's standards of viral, but at LinkedIn in 2020 standards, it was viral. Today's viral, you have like 100,000 people are liking it. And then it was like 1,200 people were liking it. So when that happened, it ended up getting picked up by all this media about, the Post. So, Working Mother Media, Good Morning America, Daily Mail, a pub in Australia. So it got picked up and it really blew up. And so at that time, I was just like, screw you. Like, who are you to tell me that I look tired? I am tired. And so is everybody else. Thank you. Bye. And that was essentially the post, like summed up there pretty quickly. But, my strategy, everyone has their different strategies with trolls. I do not talk to them. I block them and I delete their comments and I move on with my day. But early on, it was a little bit hard for me to people to make all comments because it was always about my appearance. It was always about how I looked.
Yeah.
And that still today is what people will comment on. And it's not just on LinkedIn, it's everywhere. And LinkedIn is tame compared to Twitter, compared to Facebook. Facebook is ruthless, compared to Instagram. Like all these platforms are really intense. And with LinkedIn, it's not as intense. But for me, I was just, kind of taken aback, like, what, they don't like me? Like I work so hard for everyone to like me and I'm putting out content and I'm helping others. And this is how they're responding to me helping others, is to make comments about how I look. And so it got to a point where I was, getting upset. I actually thought about one point about deleting my LinkedIn account because the trolling just got so intense, because it
Wow.
wasn't just on the comments. It was also people sending me direct messages and also emails. And there have been times, and I know other creators have had this happen too, like people will send me harassing emails and, people, I have no idea who they are, but I mean, now my strategy, like it doesn't even bother me. It's like water, off my skin. It's not anything for me now, but early on, it was hard. And I also think with social in general, because LinkedIn is social, there's a lot of people who have kids who are teenagers who get phones and have apps, and there's no conversation with their parents, or maybe there is, but not to the level of like, what is the strategy if somebody is harassing you or bullying you online? Like, how do you respond to that? How do you deal with that? And I think and I have two girls. They're not teenagers yet, thankfully, but at some point, like they're going to be, and it's a whole process, because a lot of people like myself, I didn't have social media in high school. I didn't have
Mhm.
it. And I
And
didn't
I
have
know.
social media until, I want to say I didn't have a Facebook account because my school wasn't a part of the Facebook network for schools
Mhm.
when Facebook first came out. So I think like MySpace in 2007 or whatever year that was, 2006 is when I
Yeah.
had social, and it wasn't on my phone. It was like on a computer. It was on a
Mhm.
desktop computer. But other than that, I think that the whole trolling and how to deal with that. And for a lot of brands too, you have one part, which is you have parents with their kids and how do you deal with all the online bullying and how do you deal with that? And then you have brands, like what's your crisis strategy? How do you deal with something negative that comes out about your company, and how do you deal with backlash? And what's your strategy that you have in place for trolls and for negative
Mhm.
comments? And what's your internal process look like when that's going on? And, whether it's your business or your personal life, you have to have strategies in place for both, because it's one of those areas that it's going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to evolve. And I think it's been really worse in the last 3 years because so many people are unhappy and there's so much
Yeah.
stress and there's so much chaos and there's so much misinformation and all kinds of things that are out there now, where like 5 years ago, there weren't these things out there. Like the things that people see on TikTok, for example, today, people weren't seeing 5 years ago.
No.
And it's changed and evolved so much, and it's just going to continue to. So evolving and changing along with that is important. But for me, it was more of how do I not be upset and how do I not care? And then one day it just clicked where I just stopped caring about the trolls and I really just moved on. But it still happens. It
Mhm.
happened today. I mean, it happens, but it's not an event like it felt like before.
Yeah. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. The more visible you get, the more attention you attract, you're going to
Right.
attract all kinds of attention because there are all kinds of people out there, some of them that are not very happy with their lives and they don't want you to be happy, or they don't think that you deserve all of this power or credit or visibility. Who is she? I'm talking more about me and how I've experienced it. Who is she to be talking to me about
Right.
this or talking to all these people? Why are these people giving her attention? Does she even know what she's talking about? She's just there because she's put on these selfies and she's just getting by because she's good looking.
Right.
And
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, the
it's
thing is that it's
minimizing.
just, yeah, it's totally minimizing. And I think that the screen gives someone a lot of power,
Mm,
because you can be anyone you want behind a screen. But when you're face to face with someone, you can't pretend because you see right through it. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
also another lesson for social media. Maybe that's for another day, another topic of who are people really beyond the platform.
Yeah. We've talked about that, right? We've talked about developing a nose for figuring out who people really are. And we bonded a little bit over how bad we were at that. I think I'm still
Mm-hmm.
fairly terrible, but it's a work in progress, really being able to figure out who people are.
It is. It takes time. And I think also if you're not interacting with someone and you're just interacting with them online and you never have that opportunity,
Mm.
you won't necessarily know. You don't know until you know.
Mm, absolutely. And I love that you brought up people pleasing in your answer, because that's again something that a lot of people don't talk about. People say that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm just going to put whatever I want out there. I don't really care what people say. That is not true. We absolutely care. We're, as content creators, spending hours and hours and hours every single week thinking up of things, creating things to show the world because we care. We want people to like us. It's true. Why pretend that it's
Right.
not true?
And so, yes, exactly. And also when you're so focused on who you're speaking to and you're in your content, you're speaking to that person that you have in mind, that, that persona of the individual that you are trying to connect with, work with, whatever the case is, and you get negative feedback, it's natural to think, okay, well, how do I make an adjustment, or how do I pivot, or how do I change what I'm doing? Because sometimes we do have to look internally and say, okay, maybe this didn't land the right way, or maybe I made a mistake in this regard. But I think when it comes to the comments that I see the most of with trolls, and this happens with, unfortunately, it's with more women than men on social media, where they're coming for how they look, because it's a low blow and
Yeah.
it's an easy thing to say, and it's just unfortunately the way society is. But
Yeah.
hopefully younger children that we're raising today will not grow up to be like that.
Generation Alpha. We have
Yes.
hopes. That's
Yes.
who you're raising, right? They're Generation Alpha.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I mean,
incredible.
listen, it's all tech, that's all they have is technology. That's all they've been brought up with. That's all they've
Yeah.
known their whole lives. I mean, my kids are 8 and 9, and I just got them these safe phone watches. I mean,
Ooh.
and in the process, I'm doing this and I'm saying, I can't believe I'm doing this for my 8 and 9 year old. But if they want to go outside and play and go all around, I feel safe knowing that they can call me if there's an emergency,
Mm-hmm.
or that I can see where they are through the app, and I can see, who's, they're texting and all of that. So
Yeah.
there is hope for the future. I think so. I think it will evolve at some point for the positive, not for the negative, but
I
we'll see.
I believe that too. That's a great note to end our conversation on. Thank you so much, Melanie, for taking the time and sharing everything that you know, everything that you've built in such an honest way. I really appreciate it. Would
Thank
you
you.
would you like to tell people where to find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. I would say that is the best place to find me, humantobrand.com. You can also find me on Instagram because I'm there too. I'm also on Twitter if you're there, and YouTube and TikTok, but I'm not really active on TikTok.
Mm, maybe a goal for 2023.
I'm not sure.
No,
We'll see.
that's fair.
We'll see about that.
Thank you so much, Melanie. This was such a
Yeah.
pleasure and an honor to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.